Hey everybody, welcome back to the archive. It's BJ, Connor. We're here today with a discourse episode. We're just going to talk about textual debates on social media.
It's a very prevalent topic today.
Yeah,
it's actually a major way that people communicate these days.
It is, yeah. A lot of people just want to have debates on text message or through Facebook or whatever other social media platform. And I really feel like a lot of the times when you start to have really strong debates with people and you invite them to, hey, come on a podcast, or hey, go into my DMs and let's have a phone call about this, or let's do a Zoom meeting or something. Let's like face-to-face hash this out.
Changes everything.
Yeah, they don't want to, either one, they're scared and they don't want to do it because they're uncomfortable. They're not used to it.
Right.
They don't have experience or exposure in doing that. Or really it's just a if not reluctance, most of the time people will come, and if they do come on, then the whole dynamic of the conversation is different.
Do you remember talking on the phone? Like in middle school, high school, just talking on the phone all the time with your friends or girls that you were talking to. I mean, we used to spend so much time on that. And now we live in this era where we can spend just as much time getting in these never-ending textual debates after comment after comment after comment. That sometimes, I hate to say this, as someone who avidly participates in them, they sometimes lead nowhere. You know?
Like text conversations?
I tend to walk away from them thinking, like very frequently, they didn't learn anything. And
neither did you.
Neither did I.
Yeah.
Because we were just not really looking for understanding. We were trying to prove a point or defend a position.
Yeah, so I think a lot about online debating, for one, it's not an official platform that people use. People don't use Facebook on purpose to go and have meaningful discussions with other people.
Right.
I mean, there are groups out there where people have created groups for that purpose, like the Daily Discussion
right.
and Resurgent and everybody else who is in our friend group trying to do these sorts of things. But even so, when people go to those Facebook groups, no one's going there with the intention all the time to learn something or to teach people. It's kind of just like, oh, I'm going to join this group that I'm interested in because people have shared interests and I want to, be exposed or whatever. And people start having debates and it just becomes a circle jerk of nonsense most of the time.
Right. Well, Resurgent into the Daily Discussion both definitely became that. There's a new one that's kind of involves some of the same people. It's the Cult of Prometheus, and I think, that kind of tilts a certain way because of the founders and the way that they feel. But what they've done is actually kind of interesting. They just allow it all. Trolling, memes, intellectual discussion, and I kind of think that is the only way you really can do it.
Sort of a libertarian, anarchistic, like just going at it. Just let people say whatever the hell they want.
Yeah, that's what
uncensored.
I mean. Because I never practice any actual administrative.
Neither do I.
Yeah.
So I remember talking to you about that randomly one day because I'm an admin on the Daily Discussion still. And all the time I get notifications of people complaining about other people and people flagging discussions or comments, asking for them to be removed and deleted. And almost every single time I just approve it, auto approve.
It's an easy job.
I know.
It's honest work, but it's an easy job.
It reminds me of like God in the sky, like the angel that stamps all of the prayers that come up. It's just like stamping no to most of them because they're so hard. But it's like the opposite of that.
Well, and I wonder too about the fact that we detach ourselves from body language and eye movement and inflection, that how much does that really give you the capacity to understand the other person's perspective? I mean, they used to say in school, like 90% of language is body language, which I don't believe that.
Is that evidence-based?
How can you quantify that? But at the same time, I do believe there is some truth. There's inklings of truth to the fact that a lot of the way that we express ourselves to each other is through
nonverbal
communication. Exactly.
Truly, and there is an aspect of that that's lost. One of the reasons why I'm a little concerned with COVID, if it continues for very much longer, in the next couple of years, if this stays going on for 3, 4, 5 years, the next generation of children, they don't see people's facial expressions on a day-to-day basis when they travel around.
Right.
They're not understanding how those social cues are working.
Right.
They're not getting to play with their friends the same. They're not getting to have real face-to-face conversations. And it's a little scary to me just in the long term of how it's going to be effective on social.
Right. Because part of how I let you know how I feel about your behavior is the facial expressions I make in response to the things that you say and do.
Right. And a lot of language is cultural, but a lot of body language is almost universal.
Right.
Most of the time. I mean, I don't think that there's a culture in which smiling means fuck you, let's fight.
Right.
You know what
I mean, even inflections are oftentimes universal. If you like listen to someone ask a question in Spanish, the way that the question ends is like, huh? Like it kind of drags on. Like
as long as the language isn't a tonal language,
right?
Like Chinese,
Right.
Mandarin, or something. If it's a language that's like Hebrew or Greek or something else, then of course, yeah, the intonation adds on.
We
to
all
that.
laugh, you know. We all smile. We all do these really consistent set of things that you can understand even if you don't understand the language. Like I know that when a person's laughing, obviously they're experiencing humor in something or they're finding humor in something, but even if I don't understand the words that they're actually saying.
What if people just got better at communicating using emojis? I mean, there's a shitload of emojis for a lot of emotions. You know, if you're good at using emojis in standard conversation, I think you can do a lot to get across feelings and emotions and, you know, nonverbal communicative concepts.
Right. Like you call me weird, I send an alien emoji, and you're like, he knows.
Yeah,
he's
he knows
weird.
I'm just joshing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, you know, there's that. It's kind of a new agey thing, but a lot of people compare emojis to hieroglyphics.
Oh yeah,
They're
yeah,
like
yeah.
image representations of the actual thing that they're trying to
Symbols. Yeah, they're symbols,
convey.
symbolic representations. I actually built like a story out of emojis once. It's on my Facebook wall.
Really?
Yeah, like it was a quarter of a page of straight emojis building a whole story. I built my own hieroglyphic mythos.
Wow.
It was all about like rich men coming to take over the planet and then giving vaccines and drugs and all this stuff like which kills a bunch of people, and then a new generation rises and there's a battle of good and evil, and there's
They'll build the church around that someday.
yeah, there's like a whole thing, man. I'll try to find it and I'll post it
in the link if we can. Yeah.
I'll post it for sure because it's pretty funny.
I get disappointed, man, with the textual conversations. I do. I mean, it's also fun, you know, when it doesn't devolve into shit slinging, but it seems like with most circumstances, it ends up devolving into shit slinging.
Yeah, most of the time, because what I find is that when people are having textual discussions, most of the time, and I'm guilty of this too.
Yeah, me too.
I've done this. It's you don't really read for understanding, right? You don't read to understand the other person's argument. You're reading just enough to understand what you assume to be the point. And then you immediately are thinking and processing in your head, not reading to understand their point of view, but reading to attack it.
Right.
And most of the time, people don't even read the comment. If your comment's longer than a paragraph, most of the time they read the first few sentences and then they immediately emotionally react to that thing.
Which is a strategy, by the way. Like I'll just write a huge boatload of text that, you know, and then it's like, oh, I did not want to be this invested in this conversation. Sure. So like it's almost like I lose. Because I don't want to respond to that novel that you just presented to me.
Which is sad on one hand, because if we're going to sit here and have a discussion about something that we both actually care about.
Which is why it translates so much better when you actually just get on a podcast long format like this.
And talk to each other.
Right.
Well, yeah, because one thing is, you know, not only my thumbs and my wrists hurt after I'm sitting there smashing buttons for 45 minutes.
Right.
But you're also trying to have these immediate responses to these comments, and you have all of these ideas floating around in your mental space, of which is incredibly diverse and just vacuous and big, and you have great ideas, and then you have to squeeze them down into this like 2-inch fucking wall of text.
Right.
It's like an inch and a half in diameter, 5 or 6 words across the line, like not even a quarter of a page in a book. And so you're trying to squeeze such ideas down, and unless you're extremely good at distilling things and putting them in a really cogent manner, most people, you have to write out half of a book to get any semblance of a decent thought onto a social media post. And I think that's also a limiting factor of discussions. And over time, as people aren't experiencing good discourse with their fellow man, and they're using these platforms as their main tool of communication, it's actually doing something to them, to their software, where it's actually limiting their ability to have discussion. Truly.
Well, it's also not in real time, right? Like when we have a conversation right here, I have to respond right away.
Sure.
You know, for the camera. But even in real life, when the camera's not on, you still kind of have. You can't just sit there for 10 minutes and think about what you're going to say and expect the other person to remain engaged. But with these textual conversations, you could take an hour and really put together this coherent thought that you wouldn't have been able to come up with in that.
Which is why,
instance.
Social media could be an amazing tool for discussion.
Sure.
In that way. Truly. Like, that is a strength, I feel, not a weakness. And I wish that was something that we capitalized on, which there are some other social medias out there, some new platforms that are coming out, which are trying to facilitate good discussion.
Sure.
But I don't think that they're big enough, they're not popular enough. Not enough people are coming together saying, I want to discuss things with people. I want to have arguments and debates. Because most of the time, again, as we were talking, debates don't lead to anything actually good or beneficial or conducive to you becoming a better person, a more wholly actualized, growing individual. Most of the time, again, we're just having emotional shit-slinging storms with each other on the internet, barely reading each other's comments and sort of just like reacting to them.
Right. And I feel like it's relevant right now because, I mean, at least in my perspective, it seems to be getting worse with this election. I mean, it seems like every time I try to have a conversation about anything unrelated to politics, somehow we bring it back full circle into the political sphere, and it's just it's upsetting.
That's another thing to talk about too, is just we're products of environment,
right?
Which is why it's so important that we have these other social media platforms to go to, and we try to make channels like this or whatever. But we are products of our environment, and a lot of people consume media on a day-to-day basis, and a lot of the media is controlled by the same people, and we're fed the same things constantly. And when something large is happening in the world, like a holiday or a political event or a tragic event or something, people are always going to talk about that. That's just what it's going to be predicated on for the most part.
Right.
Consensus reality works that way. So we're not going to be able to get away from that. It would be more ideal if people would have better discussions. It doesn't matter about whatever the thing is.
Couldn't that better discussion be... Couldn't it happen by us changing the format in which we have the discussions?
Sure.
So instead of textual discussions, we have them like we're having.
Yeah.
And I know I said that already, but I just think
to reiterate, it's a good point. We should just like start inviting people to have face-to-face discussions. I encourage anybody listening, if you're finding yourself debating with people a lot on the internet, if you're actually having meaningful conclusions where you're walking away learning something and so is the other person, awesome. But most of the time, we're just kind of wasting our energy and our thought form. We're just wasting time yelling at each other when really nobody's going to social media to learn from other people. They're going to argue their point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It becomes selling instead of offering perspective. Like, I want to sell you on this idea where I don't know how to explain it. It's hard to elucidate it, but for some reason it seems like when you have a conversation with someone in person, it's almost harder to sell because you get that inflection and that body language, it creates a deeper level of understanding to the point where I don't want to sell you anymore. I just want to tell you why I think what I think. But with the text, you eliminate all that. So it's just, I'm going to sell you.
Truly. Yeah. And it's kind of like social media in a nutshell too. We don't go to social media necessarily to like look at other people's posts and to really like look at their images and learn things from them. We kind of just want to go and post everything about ourselves.
What would the world look like right now if we all had to have discussions and there was never any social media? I mean, how different do you think things would be as far as the way we communicate?
I don't think things would be much different in terms of the actual outcomes necessarily, because we're just humans, we're just people, and we've been the same ever since the dawn of time.
Sure.
We still eat, sleep, fuck, kill. We still are jealous and angry and sad.
Right.
We still burn shit for our energy for the most part,
right.
aside from like nuclear. Even electricity is burning shit to like run the generation to get the
right.
power. Like, it's all just burning shit. We haven't changed that much.
Right.
So I don't know if we really would be in a quote unquote better position, but I think that the dynamic of discussion would be different. And I do feel like the dynamic of the discussion at large is becoming more and more decadent, and it is deteriorating, and it is cause for concern, because eventually we will get to a point in which I think the discussion is so degraded and debased that potentially there will be no more discussion. There will only be polarized emotional anger and hatred and shit slinging and civil war. Like, I know that's a bit hyperbolic. There's some hyperbole there, but that is my ultimate fear. And that's why I'm so stoked about this channel with you, man.
Right.
Just because we get to do this. And
and the people who engage with a podcast like this are going to be the types of people who actually want to have these discussions instead of retreating to the group and saying, I don't need to hear anything anyone else has to say that differs from what's already been validated to me by my peers. So it's cool that we get to do that, but it's also cool that we get to pull in people who are interested in that as well.
Yeah, for sure. On that note, I wonder if there is, there is utility in hiding behind a screen, like you were saying. We might be more bold to say things that we would otherwise not be willing to say in reality to people that we love and care about, or even in a face-to-face discussion where we may be more timid or shy to say the things that we truly mean, but for whatever reason we aren't. There is some utility in that.
And maybe we can channel it too, so that way we don't have to put our loved ones in the situation where they maybe not want to talk about something, but we feel this desire to speak about it, so we can channel it to people like strangers on the internet.
Yeah.
Which could be a good thing. I mean, I think to a certain degree, it's not good to not challenge your family because you love them. And if you actually love them, then you would want them to have better information. You would also want to learn from them. But at the same time, I think there's certain conversations that, like I know with my family, there's certain conversations with certain relatives that just can't be had without ruining the night. So I can talk about that with some random guy
Person
on the
on the
internet, and it's
street.
totally fine.
Oh, yeah, even on the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Do you find there to be positive value in talking to that same family member that you couldn't have face-to-face discussions with online? Do you feel like it's more productive? Do you feel like you just avoid it in general? Like, I guess my question is, do you find yourself talking to certain people more via text than you do in person, and do you do it on purpose?
I think anybody that I talk to in person, I just talk to in person for the most part. They'll chime in on one of my posts or something, and we'll go over it. I mean, like I have, I think there's some topics that are more likely to come up on social media, like politics.
Sure.
That, if I'm at a gathering where it's somebody that I grew up with, it might not get brought up. So I guess it just depends on, it's contextual a little bit.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess you don't really have an example, huh? Not really. Not like a person that you think. I guess I that kind of brings me to want to talk about trolling a little bit.
If I see somebody who I haven't seen in a while, it's just unlikely that politics are going to come up. But like one of my my parents' neighbors, or I guess my neighbors from when I was growing up, chimed in on one of my posts, and I like the guy. I respected him when I grew up. I respect him now. But we had a little disagreement. But I feel like if I saw him in a social setting, the conversation would have just never gotten brought up because we had. It's like, hey man, we haven't seen each other in forever. Let's just be good.
Yeah, exactly. So there is some utility in having these textual conversations because it's like a little bit of liquid courage.
Yeah.
Like in a sense.
Yeah.
We can say the things that we're afraid to say.
Right.
And
don't drink and use social media.
Yeah, you might pull a Trump.
Yeah. There you go.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of strengths and weaknesses in social media. A weakness is definitely trolling.
Sure.
Like using that to the extreme, that protective armor of the dissociative quality. You can become a troll easily.
Right. It's something to hide behind.
For sure.
I notice, even people that I don't consider trolls will often say something that's a bit akin to an ad hominem.
Sure.
And then I'll call them out on it and say, well, let's stick to the topic at hand. They'll say, oh, I was just joking.
Right.
It's an easy way to...
way too easy.
Yeah.
It's even worse in forums where it's totally anonymous, like Reddit or something like that.
Yeah.
Or 4chan or something.
Yeah.
People are just disgustingly gross on the internet because they can be, right?
Yep.
So social media, in the beginning, we used to use MySpace and things.
Right.
I don't think it was to that degree.
Yep.
But now more so people have become a bit more apathetic as it's more ubiquitous in our lives and it's everywhere. And
right.
We don't really think of it like that anymore. So people just kind of express themselves however they want to most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely more so are people expressive, wantonness expression, like just complete and utter whatever the hell they want in the moment online on social media versus in person, for sure.
I think it takes driving to the next level because it's the removal of the immediate consequences that you'd have to face from another person from your behavior. When you're in a car, you're protected by your little shell.
Yeah.
You kind of think of your computer screen or your phone screen as like a shell that protects you. If I cut in front of somebody, chances are I'm just not going to have to deal with their anger.
That's why we call people like that keyboard warriors.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, you do kind of have to deal with someone's anger online when you say something to them because they're going to respond. unless you block them.
Yeah,
you can't do
that's
that.
a whole other.
Right.
I think we even talked about that in a different episode recently.
Yeah.
About just like the nature of blocking people and how we shouldn't do it, but there's
some people
another...
I think you should block though.
Sure, yeah, like violent people or people who are just utterly toxic that you just literally cannot...
That invoke like rage in you on a regular basis. It's probably best for your...
Sure.
Yeah.
Even then, I feel like having those people available to sow seeds in their lives
Right.
and
That's true too.
But then you're also exposed to their content and, like psychological effects of seeing things even in passing can be, very detrimental.
Everybody that I've ever blocked, besides like someone who was like clearly some kind of computer bot, I unblocked later on.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've only blocked a handful of people in my life, and I think it's a dangerous trend.
Right.
When people are like, "Oh, unfriend me if you have a different opinion," or
I don't like
block
that
me
at all.
if this or whatever. For sure.
It means that you would rather be safe with your ideas. It means that you would rather not die. And what I mean by that is like, and I think this is like a very Peterson-esque idea, but it's the idea that like every time you learn something new, a part of you that thought differently kind of dies so that new part can be integrated. So you would rather let those things live than to die.
That's a really good. There's a book in this joint behind me called Forbidden Knowledge, and the author wrote about it for a number of reasons, and it turns into some weirdness because he talks about Sade, which the word sadistic comes from. I think it's Henry de Sade. He like was into child porn and like very nasty, hurting people. Yeah, just a lot of craziness.
Yeah.
But the whole premise of the book in the first half, because the whole second half is about the nature of beauty and knowledge and Sade and shit like that.
Interesting segue.
Yeah, weirdness.
Yeah.
Sorry, everyone. But not wanting to talk about the nasties, we're talking about...
No, I was talking about his book.
Yeah,
going
it's
from that
weird.
to that, not what you said.
The first half of his book is all about the nature of knowledge. And he uses mythologies, biblical stories, more contemporary fiction like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Alice in Wonderland.
Sure.
Just a bunch of different sources, even the Prometheus story, all sorts of mythology, to talk about instances in which human beings gain knowledge, and in the process of gaining knowledge, we literally destroy ourselves. And on one hand, it's kind of what you're talking about. You learn something new, you become a different person. The old you is no longer you anymore. So in a metaphorical sense, there's a death there, right? But in a more literal sense, when societies gain more and more knowledge through scientific endeavors or the pursuit of some tangible good, and eventually they gain knowledge and the means of production change and your social constructs change. As you gain more and more and more knowledge, your society literally reshapes and reconfigures itself, sometimes to the degree in which it literally collapses or kills itself or kills others, and then literally like disfigures itself. And we as individuals can do that as well. The Prometheus story is a mythological representation of that, where Prometheus defied the orders of, I believe it was Zeus, and gave fire to mankind, and then was forced to, was just punished. This terrible punishment.
Right.
And that you bring up the reason why I bring it up is you just evoked the thought in me of gaining knowledge and becoming different. And a lot of people are reluctant to learn, for one, because it's effort, and for two, just because we spend so much time arguing on social media that we don't actually develop the skill set necessary to think about things in critical ways which actually lead to personal growth and development, because we're too distracted. We're arguing meaninglessly. There's no actual real discourse. We don't care about learning.
Right.
We're just there having emotional responses and reactions, doing what everyone else is doing in a vacuum echo chamber, living as an automatic reflection of our environment, and just pretty much just continuing to be what just everybody else is.
Right. Well, I, for one, am very grateful to live in a world where there are third-party entities that have now decided what is true and what is not, so I no longer have to go out of my way to think about it.
No. No. You're funny.
Yeah.
That was funny. Funny joke. Funny guy. He was a child actor.
I was a child
I didn't know
actor.
you did stand-up.
Yeah. I'm working on my tight 10. So.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So the book is a really good read. I'll actually post it in the comments if I remember to do that, for sure. But the nature of learning from other people and approaching discussion in a way that you actually want to learn something and not just change everyone else's mind is a positive blessing. Is a great like moral, I suppose, or way of life to adopt.
Well, that's what I was kind of getting at, is like there's this new subset of people that are really loud and obnoxious on the internet, and I'm not going to name names, but they are getting behind this whole third-party fact-checking thing, because I think what it stems from is their lack of ability to see beauty in the fact that we do all disagree. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's actually, the world is better when we can all contribute our ideas into the pot and then comprehensively assess all of them to figure out which ones should be used in that specific context.
Sure.
But there is this loud group of people that believe that no, there's some things that just there's no need to argue anymore. So I don't.
Sure.
So the fact that you would even try to argue it, and it's like a lot of us when we argue against those people, we're not actually trying to really argue that they're wrong. We're just arguing the philosophical standpoint that nothing is that objective, especially something like, vaccines. Even though I'm not an anti-vaxxer, or like a multitude of issues that just seem to be actually kind of controversial, yet there's this group of people that have decided upon themselves that no, it's not controversial. This is the truth. This is the way.
You're getting at a point of like meta arguing.
Yeah.
A meta argument. You're not arguing about the specifics of whatever the argument is. You're arguing about the nature of truth and knowledge.
Right.
And that just like when you used to do the daily discussion, it was like your motto was where even this is a place where even the best ideas are challenged, meaning even ideas that are consensus, written in stone, hard facts, evidence that are unchangeable, and they're like axiomatic to our forward motion of logic. Why even argue about them? Why even have discussions about them anymore? And you're kind of coming from the angle of like, there's still value in revisiting old ideas.
Exactly.
There's still value in having discussion and potentially even being devil's advocate and arguing about them. And you feel as if it's a mistake for people to try and silence that.
Well, I guarantee you that after the theory of gravity had been instantiated, that whenever someone spoke against it or even just said, well, maybe this is also true, they were ridiculed. But now we've gone on to figure out that gravity is not a good example, but Newtonian physics was a better example.
Sure.
Someone would say, oh, well, maybe I don't believe in Newtonian physics. Oh, well, that guy's an idiot. But turns out we look back later and it's actually, it's a subset of something greater.
Sure, yeah. And so like we should always revisit those things and not be afraid to revisit them because, sometimes our limited perspective in the moment is skewed and the way that we process all of the knowledge that we have is limited to the point in which maybe later in life when we have better tools, better modes of thinking, better societal functions, the nuances of what we evolve into will allow us to look back and reprocess old data to output new information, right? And so I agree with you.
I'm pretty sure it was Voltaire who said that you should be weary of those you cannot question. And I just thought of this. I think you should be weary of ideas that you cannot question, even more so, because we have our limited our limited perceptual senses that all they do is take objective reality and translate it into the sphere that we call mental. But they are limited by our body. They're not by any means the apex of anything as far as we know. So we have no reason to really deem anything to be objective other than that we can experience anything at all. So
yeah, and we're going to touch that in our absolutism versus relativism podcast episode on the union of opposites. But yeah, I agree with that. Definitely. And there's sort of this neurotic tendency for some people to be like to espouse that idea on one spectrum, but then completely go against it in another one in this like weird, uncritical.
I think most people do on accident.
Yeah,
sometimes.
we just like uncritically contradict ourselves in negative ways.
Yeah.
Of course, my philosophy of metaphysics is that contradiction is the highest truth, but I'm not talking about that particular type of contradiction in this particular instance. It's just some people will say ideas. If there is an idea that can't be challenged, it's cause for concern. Right. If they're thinking of something like dogmatically or religiously, like if I can't talk about the nature of God, then this is dangerous and you're just a bigot and all this stuff.
Right.
Because it's dangerous. But then if you flip the spectrum on something that they feel passionate about, like sex and gender, or something that's more contemporary, like vaccines or something, then they immediately go back to their go-to emotional response of, oh, you're completely wrong, I'm right on X, Y, and Z, rather than just on, it's like almost a topic of discussion, how emotionally charged they are on one topic versus another will allow them to espouse that philosophy or not.
I think that's why a lot of people voted for Trump, just because so many people, including the media, were telling them that there's no way you could argue with us that this guy isn't a bad guy.
Sure.
And so the fact that people don't like to be told we can't talk about certain things. And so just despite the media and despite everybody who espouse this idea, I'm gonna vote against it, because that's kind of how we are. It's like the Adam and Eve story. You tell someone they can't do something or they can't think a certain way, and they're immediately drawn to it.
So defiant.
Right.
We're so defiant.
We are.
Societies get more complicated and nuanced over time, right? And where in the beginning maybe we had language that we just used to have discussions about the whatever reality is occurring so we can survive, so we can spread our seed and not die. Eventually, the actual society becomes more complicated. We become more complicated. Our language becomes more complicated. So the things that we can think of and actually roll about in our mind's eye becomes deeper and deeper and more nuanced. And I look at human beings like linear functions sometimes. I know it's a little basic, but f of x equals y, like a basic linear function. The x value is everything in your physical environment, and the y value is everything that your mental and soul can act upon as an output from those inputs of the physical space, right? And as things become more nuanced and we get better at thinking about things, we can have discussions that are more meta. And those discussions unfold into sometimes lying or saying things that we don't mean, not necessarily lying, but just like, again, obfuscating our meaning.
Right.
Or we confuse ourselves with our flowerful and pretty language. And so eventually
ideas and identity.
Yeah, like we conflate idea and identity. So many crazy things can occur just because the way that we look at the world becomes more nuanced,
right?
And our language does as well. So we should approach these conversations for understanding, regardless of being right or wrong all the time, not necessarily approaching them for the sake of winning an argument, but for learning and growing and teaching others at the same time. At least that's my personal philosophy, and that's why I have discussion with other people. Because I am incorrect sometimes, and I'll admit that when I am. Sometimes I'm right. Sometimes I'm incorrect, and I don't know I'm incorrect, and I'm still arguing for the sake of being right. But I think
sometimes it's hard to tell whether you're correct or you're incorrect.
Right.
Sometimes issues, for me personally, like they'll plague me for years, and I there's certain issues I still can't figure out whether I'm right or I'm wrong about.
And that's okay, because we're just human, right? We're just one human being. We've been alive for less than 30,000 days on this rock, floating about space, and
which has been around infinitely longer than we have been.
Yep. And we have to study and learn by our own experience, and we have to make the same mistakes that our ancestors did over and over and over just to come to the same conclusions, just to die, just to have it all happen again. So give yourself some slack, right? That's kind of how I have to remind myself, give yourself some slack for being human. But at the same time, look at the value in the discussion and approach the discussion for the value, and again, consciously look at what that is and what you're getting out of it and what they're getting out of it. And it's not necessarily always about being right or wrong in an objective sort of like knowledge for or conversation for knowledge sense.
Right.
We should have conversation for understanding, which goes beyond that, again, beyond right and wrong, in my opinion. It's more transcendent. It's more integral.
And trolls don't do that. They just want to troll about what they think they're right about, and it's totally different than actually trying to learn and grow and allow yourself to be vulnerable is what you're doing.
Sure.
When you allow yourself to be open to new information that maybe you were never introduced to, or maybe was never offered to you in a way that would resonate with you. So
right.
it's important that we
leading by example, right? Just try to be the light in the world, and that's kind of where my motivation is with having conversations with people often is. And yeah, it's true. Trolls are kind of like the polar opposite of my philosophy, 100%. And we like
that doesn't mean there isn't utility in trolling.
Exactly. Yeah. Like there's some utility in taking your real world anger and then plugging it into the internet and releasing it in a somewhat healthy way, right? You're not damaging things or breaking things
hurting
in reality.
Anybody.
But you could be hurting people. You could be emotionally damaging them or sowing little seeds in the youth that they can grow up to be little D-bags, and it's cool. But kind of like becoming a meme lord is sort of the same thing.
Right.
Memes are like a whole nother topic discussion. We should talk about the magic of memes maybe in another episode. There's so much to be said about talking to people, man.
Right.
Like just having conversation, what can come out of it?
Well, it's a weird thing that we do for seems like longer periods than any other species. Like even if you watch like a couple birds make noises at each other for a minute, but they don't sit there for hours doing it and unpacking these complex ideas. I mean, it's really basic compared to this strange, almost magical ability that we have to take what is in our mental sphere, transmute it into something that is tangible. I mean, sound waves are tangible, and then it goes into the recipient, and they can actually understand what it is that you're trying to elucidate.
That's actually beautiful how you paint that picture. There's an aspect of my books. There's a chapter that I've written that kind of goes over that topic and why the nature of language is so limiting, because the levels of translation that has to occur from its pure thought form to another person's mind to be able to understand it and then regurgitate it back to you and have a discussion about it.
Right.
There's so many layers and channels of translation where things are just lost and missed and misconstrued, and just the nature of reduction of any concept or thing that's big and beautiful and abstract, and then reducing it into something that can be used as a utility is always detrimental to the true meaning of that thing. And there is, as much as I'm like, everyone should go out and have conversations with people and everyone should just talk and use their words and look for the values and love each other, sometimes there are things that can't be said.
Right.
You know what I mean? Sometimes there are things that just cannot be said.
But that's where art comes in, and music and
other forms
narrative
of expression
and stuff like that.
But then I guess the same whole the original question is like textual debates on social media and why they're bad and why they're good can translate into how we interpret and consume multimedia. Like, should we cancel culture that artist, or should we, I really don't like country music, so I should just never pay attention to country music. Like, we should be more open to things, not just conversations, but ideas, right?
Right. I wonder if there's a group of friends out there who just have riveting conversations via textual debates, or maybe there's a Facebook group where they just really got it down. You know, they just
got it.
No ad hominems, no trolling, no bullshit. Just they're really, but I doubt it.
Wholesome.
Highly doubt it.
Maybe two things I want to say on that. If somebody exists out there and you see this, shoot me the invite. I'm there. Yeah. Two, I think anything on YouTube dealing with Alan Watts or Terrence McKenna is pretty much that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Truly.
You never seen a debate in a YouTube comment of a Terrence McKenna video?
I don't think so. Or if it is, everybody like...
I did the other day, but it was because Terrence McKenna had made some like almost political quote. But obviously Terrence McKenna admittedly didn't really care about politics that much, so wasn't necessarily his strong suit.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but it wasn't like they were debating like an actual, complex philosophy of Terrence McKenna and Alan Watts.
Yeah, most people are always either bandwagoning or just, I'm new to the show, can I learn something? Or everyone's just like trying to spread love.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, that's kind of like the utility of new agey people, is that like they're so fascinated by ideas that you could really say anything to them that's profound and they love it. They're impressionable.
Yeah, they're like little babies.
Yeah.
We're babies, man.
We are.
Yeah, I'm a baby.
But I feel like we always, like, full circle, and I almost feel like maybe I hope it's not like stultifying, because we always come back to talking about how people should talk. And that's not one to say, like, I'm going to be honest, I acted in a way on a textual debate the other day that I wasn't proud of, I went over the line and I was hyperbolic, and I didn't do any ad hominems or anything like that, but I got close, so I'm not telling you to do something that I say that I can do flawlessly or anything like that. I just think that
people.
Yeah.
And people are people. We should always, strive for the ideal, but the ideal can never be achieved or attained ever. It's just, it can't. Right. That's why it's ideal, right? And the ideal gives us a pathway that we can move forward towards. So it's good that you recognize that, though. Sure. We don't try to be hypocritical on the channel for sure. Right. Yeah.
Well, and starting the channel has kind of caused me to be a little bit more introspective and to step outside of myself when I'm engaging in those conversations, to think, am I really embodying the philosophy that I'm espousing? On
a day-to-day, for sure. But that's something to be said about holding yourself accountable, doing things in reality with your hands and your time and your passions, and actually like plugging yourself into something. Yeah. It gives you something to look back on as a reflective process. You know what I mean?
It reminds me of that meme with Jordan Peterson doing a podcast, and the background is like, it's just a mess. It's like a disaster. Yeah. People are like, oh, this guy's the one to tell us to clean our rooms, as if like that's something you can always attain, especially when you have children and a family. And
you're touching on like the next episode of the discourse.
Yeah,
which
for sure, which is a good segue.
Yeah, we have a whole lot outlined on that. So maybe we should start wrapping up now. But
do you want to close it down?
Yeah. So let's talk about that on the next episode. Yeah. Though. So we're gonna talk about whether or not people should give advice if they don't take it. if they don't take their own
Yeah.
advice.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think if you wait for someone who's perfect to learn from, then you'll never learn at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Alan Watts has a lot of gurus have a lot to say about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That'll definitely be the next episode that I think we record.
I mean,
for the
Gandhi,
discourse.
people are pretty sure that he had like 16-year-old girls sleeping in his bed. Does that
Yeah.
mean that his entire body of work should be completely discarded?
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's a question worth pondering,
Talk about
especially
Hitler.
considering that Gandhi and his philosophies have helped a lot of people. So what do you
Yeah.
tell those people? Do you tell them, no, they're wrong
Sure.
for learning from that man?
And we also learn in the opposite spectrum from the worst people. Should
Right.
we never teach about those people in history?
Right.
Should we never? These are big questions.
Hitler
yeah.
invented the 40-hour work week. You know, I mean, we all use that.
Really?
Yeah. And
It's crazy. It's a Masonic idea. Are you sure Hitler
Yeah.
invented that?
He was the one who, instantiated it.
Oh, the 40-hour work week. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Never mind. I'm thinking of something different completely.
But
Like-
yeah, so we'll talk about that a lot more in our next episode. But I think what the point that we're trying to get across, which is like the point we're always trying to get across, is that everything is good and bad. You know, so these textual conversations, it's really a matter of the context and how you use them and
what values you're seeking. And
right.
as long as you're consciously aware of the things you're doing or trying your best to be aware, it's all about awareness and intentionality.
Yep.
Because good and evil exist at the same time in every instance of everything,
Sure.
everywhere, and good and bad, and things are useful and not useful.
Right.
And the union of opposites is all around us. At least opposites are all around us, and their union is all around us. It's up to you as a conscious being to find the direction that you want to go in and what you want to manifest and what you want to actually like embody
And accomplish.
Exactly. And so with this channel, it's been great for me again introspectively, just like you said, sort of like why God created the universe. Maybe, you know, God hovered over the waters in Genesis and called it good, you know, reflected upon his own face in the water. It's kind of like you create something with your own two hands and you can use that to hold yourself accountable because it aligns with your actual values. So when you do something out of your animalistic nature, out of your basic tendencies, your whatever is going on with you in the evil spectrum of humanity, you can use those creative endeavors, those light sources that you've given to the world, those pieces of your soul. You can then weigh your actions in the moment and your thoughts in the moment on those ideals. And you can see when and where you're going astray, and you can hold yourself accountable and continue to move forward. So that's what this channel is about for me, man. It's been beautiful. So
It's been great, man. I've enjoyed every moment of it, and I know there's a lot more to come. So keep looking out. I guess we'll just say that you can email us at thearchiveowl@gmail.com. We have a lot of new content coming out. Our official launch date is in 2 days from now, although this episode won't be released until after that, but
yeah,
we're here.
sometime after. We're here. We're stoked, excited, and you guys can find us on pretty much all platforms. In the very beginning, we're just going to be releasing on mainly YouTube and Facebook, but very shortly we're going to be branching out to Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, Apple, Google Play, all this, or not Google Play, but
Google? It'll be
yeah,
on
it'll be
Google,
on Google. You know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
So we're going to be in all the platforms soon. Right now, though, keep your eyes out. YouTube, Facebook for sure. And then we'll keep everyone posted as
Thank
we
you
get to
for
grow.
continuing the great conversation with us.